Here's the uncomfortable truth. The average American household is silently bleeding somewhere between $300 and $500 every single month on purchases that feel completely reasonable in the moment, but are quietly dismantling any chance at a dignified retirement. Not gambling, not reckless spending, daily habits, the kind that feel so small they don't register as financial decisions at all. And that invisibility is precisely what makes them dangerous. Behavioral economists at the University of Chicago have documented this pattern for decades. When an expense falls below a certain psychological threshold, roughly $15 to $20, your brain stops processing it as a real cost. It vanishes into what researchers call the triviality filter. You're not being careless. Your cognitive system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem is that design is costing you a retirement. Let's start with the one you already know is coming: coffee. The average American spends $1,100 a year on coffee purchased outside the home. That's the average. If you're in a major metro area and you're buying a specialty drink daily, you're likely closer to $1,800 to $2,200 annually. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat this the way most personal finance content does. This isn't about the latte. It's about what that money becomes when it's invested instead. If you redirected $1,500 a year into a Roth IRA starting at age 30, and you earned the S&P 500's historical average of roughly 10.5% annually, that single habit change generates approximately $285,000 by age 67. That's not a rounding error. That's a meaningful portion of a retirement portfolio, and it came from one habit. Here's where anchoring bias enters the picture. And it matters enormously for understanding why these splurges survive. When you first started buying a $6 coffee, you probably had a moment of mild resistance. $6 felt like a lot, but within a few weeks, $6 became the anchor. Your brain recalibrated. Now the comparison isn't $6 versus $0. It's $6 versus the emotional experience of skipping it. The anchor shifted, and the real cost became invisible. This is anchoring bias operating in real time inside your daily financial decisions. Kahneman and Tversky documented this phenomenon extensively. Once a reference point is established, every subsequent evaluation is measured against it, not against the objective alternative. You're not weak for falling into this. You're running standard human cognitive firmware. Splurge number 2 is subscription services. The average household carries between 4 and 7 active streaming or digital subscriptions. Nielsen data from 2023 found that the average American pays for subscriptions totaling $219 per month. That's $2,628 a year. And here's the part that should genuinely alarm you. Research published in the Journal of Consumer Research found that people underestimate their monthly subscription spending by an average of 42%. You think you're spending $80 a month. You're actually spending $140. This isn't a character flaw. It's mental accounting at work again. Each subscription lives in its own invisible mental bucket. Netflix is entertainment. The meditation app is health. The new subscription is education. Because they're categorized differently, their combined weight never gets assessed together. But your bank account doesn't have separate buckets. It just has less money. Now let's talk about food delivery, because this one has accelerated dramatically since 2020, and the numbers are genuinely striking. The average American household spent $2,756 on food delivery and takeout apps in 2023. That's according to data from Bloomberg's Second Measure. And when you factor in delivery fees, service charges, and the behavioral reality that people order more food when ordering remotely than they would in person, the actual cost per meal is frequently 40% to 60% higher than cooking the equivalent at home. Here's what makes this particularly insidious. The app interface is designed to minimize friction and therefore minimize the feeling of spending. You tap a button. Food appears. No cash changes hands, no checkout line, No moment of hesitation. Behavioral economists call this payment decoupling. When the moment of payment is separated from the moment of consumption, spending increases substantially. So, splurge number 4 is gym memberships and fitness subscriptions that go unused. This one's worth separating into 2 categories. The first is the primary gym membership. Average cost, $58 per month nationally, according to Statista. The second is the layered fitness subscriptions on top of that. The Peloton app, the yoga platform, the running program. Americans spend an average of $155 per month on fitness-related services. And a 2022 study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that the average gym member uses their membership roughly half as often as they predicted when they signed up. The researchers identified a specific cognitive error driving this: optimism bias. When you join a gym, you're not evaluating your current behavior. You're evaluating your idealized future self. That future self works out 5 times a week. Your present self works out twice. You're paying for the gap between those 2 people every single month. So let me ask you this. When you look at your monthly bank statement, how many line items do you genuinely recognize immediately versus how many require a moment of mental archaeology to remember what they even are? If it takes you more than a second, that subscription has already achieved full invisibility. That's loss aversion in reverse. You're not feeling the loss of the money leaving your account because the autopay removes the pain point entirely. You only feel the potential loss of canceling, which feels immediate and real. Psychologists at Princeton demonstrated that the anticipation of losing a service triggers nearly the same emotional response as actually losing money. So, you keep paying, month after month, for services you've largely stopped using, because canceling feels worse than continuing. Splurge number 5 is impulse retail. And I want to be precise about what this means because it's not the big purchases. Those get scrutinized. It's the $23 purchase, the $34 add to cart, the $47 item that was on sale and felt like restraint because it was originally $89. Amazon's one-click purchasing wasn't designed for your convenience. It was designed to eliminate every moment of friction that might trigger rational evaluation. A study from the Wharton School found that the average American makes between 3 and 5 unplanned online purchases per month, averaging $67 each. Annualized, that's between $2,400 and $4,000 in spending that bypassed any deliberate financial decision-making entirely. The purchase happened before the decision did. Now here's what that looks like in retirement terms. A 35-year-old who eliminates $250 per month in impulse retail and invests that instead, at a 9% average annual return, accumulates an additional $470,000 by age 65, not from earning more, from redirecting money that was already leaving the account. This is what behavioral economists call the behavior gap, the distance between what your money could do and what it actually does because of how your brain processes small, frequent, low-friction decisions. The gap isn't created by one bad investment. It's created by thousands of small exits from your financial future. Splurge number 6 is premium gasoline in a car that doesn't require it. This one is specific, but it's worth addressing because it's a textbook case of how marketing exploits status signaling. Roughly 16 million American drivers regularly purchase premium fuel for vehicles whose engines are certified for regular unleaded. The AAA conducted a study on this and found that using premium in a regular fuel engine produces 0 measurable performance benefit, none. The cost difference between regular and premium averages about 60 cents per gallon. If you fill a 15-gallon tank twice a week, that's $936 per year in spending that does nothing except make you feel like you're doing something good for your car. This is what researchers call illusory correlation. Your brain connected premium fuel with vehicle care because premium sounds better, and that connection has no factual basis for most vehicles. Splurge number 7 is bottled water. This one tends to provoke defensiveness. So let me lead with the data. Americans spend approximately $16 billion annually on bottled water. The average household that regularly purchases single-use bottled water spends between $600 and $900 per year. The Environmental Working Group has documented extensively that municipal tap water in most American cities is subject to significantly more rigorous testing requirements than bottled water. In blind taste tests, a majority of participants cannot distinguish between filtered tap water and premium bottled water. A quality countertop filter runs between $25 and $150. A reusable bottle costs under $30. The math here isn't complicated. The behavior persists because bottled water carries a health signaling function. You're not just buying hydration, you're buying the feeling of taking care of yourself. That feeling costs you $750 a year. Let's talk about splurge number 8, which is where things get more psychologically complex. Lottery tickets and scratch cards. Annual lottery spending in the United States exceeds $105 billion. The average American adult spends approximately $320 per year on lottery products. And I want to address the psychological mechanism directly because dismissing this as irrational misses the actual function it's serving. Research from Carnegie Mellon University found that lottery participation is highest among people who feel the most constrained by their current financial trajectory. The lottery ticket isn't just a ticket, it's a cognitive escape valve. It purchases, for $2, the brief emotional experience of possibility. The problem is that the expected value of a lottery ticket is roughly 50 cents for every dollar spent. You're paying a 50% premium for a feeling. Over a working lifetime, $320 per year invested instead compounds to approximately $85,000 at a standard 8% return. That's not a small number. Splurge number 9 is the one that generates the most resistance when people hear it. And that resistance is itself diagnostic. It's dining out for convenience rather than for experience. There's an important distinction here. A meaningful dinner with people you love, that's not a splurge. That's a value. What's worth examining is the Tuesday lunch out because you didn't prep, the Thursday dinner because nobody felt like cooking, the Saturday brunch because it's just become the default. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that the average American household spent $3,639 dining out in 2023. Research from Cornell's Food and Brand Lab found that the convenience-driven subset of restaurant spending, meals chosen for ease rather than experience or social connection, accounts for roughly 60% of total dining out expenditure. That's approximately $2,183 per year in spending that isn't delivering the experiential value people often cite when defending the habit. Here's what all 9 of these splurges share. And this is the insight that most financial content never gets to, because it stops at the list. Each one exploits a different cognitive vulnerability. The coffee exploits anchoring bias. The subscriptions exploit mental accounting and payment decoupling. The food delivery exploits friction reduction and payment decoupling simultaneously. The gym memberships exploit optimism bias. The impulse retail exploits one-click friction elimination. The premium gas exploits illusory correlation. The bottled water exploits health signaling and status anxiety. The lottery exploits scarcity-induced fantasy thinking. The convenience dining exploits default behavior and decision fatigue. These aren't random habits. They're a constellation of exploited cognitive vulnerabilities, and most of them were deliberately engineered that way by the companies profiting from them. So, now let's get into the actual retirement math, because this is where urgency becomes unavoidable. If you're 40 years old and you eliminate or significantly reduce all 9 of these categories, the conservative aggregate savings lands between $800 and $1,200 per month, depending on your current spending patterns. Invested in a standard diversified index fund earning a historical average of 9% annually, $1,000 per month over 25 years generates approximately $984,000. Just under $1 million. Not from a raise, not from a stock pick, from redirecting money that was already leaving your account toward things your brain had filed under trivially small. That's mental accounting working against you at full scale. The deeper issue is what researchers call temporal discounting. Your brain systematically undervalues future rewards relative to present ones. This isn't a character defect. It's deeply wired evolutionary behavior. A reward today is neurologically worth more than the same reward decades from now. When you're standing at the coffee counter, your brain isn't running a 30-year compound interest calculation. It's registering a present pleasure and a trivially small present cost. Retirement is abstract. The coffee is concrete and immediate. You will always lose that fight if you're relying on willpower alone, because willpower is a depletable resource, and these purchasing triggers are engineered to catch you when it's lowest. So how do you actually override this? You don't fight the cognitive biases. You restructure the environment so the biases work for you instead of against you. Automate investment contributions so the money leaves your account before your brain ever registers it as available. This exploits the same payment decoupling mechanism that subscription services use against you, but in reverse. If the money disappears before your mental accounting system catalogs it, your brain adjusts its sense of available resources downward. You spend what's left. This is precisely why automatic 401k contributions are so effective. Not because people are more disciplined when they automate, because they never feel the loss. Run a subscription audit quarterly. Not annually, quarterly. Set a calendar reminder, pull every auto payment from your bank and credit card statements, and evaluate each one against one question. Did I use this in the last 30 days? Enough to justify the cost at this moment if I were paying manually instead of automatically? If the answer is no, cancel immediately. Don't defer it. Don't give it another month. The sunk cost fallacy will keep you paying for services you've stopped using indefinitely if you allow yourself to rationalize continued payments as a way to justify past ones. For food spending specifically, a simple rule from nutritional behavior research is remarkably effective. Pre-commitment. Make Sunday the default decision point for the entire week. Plan meals, order groceries for delivery once, prep 2 to 3 base components. This doesn't require elaborate cooking skills. It requires 90 minutes and a removal of Tuesday's decision fatigue. Research from Cornell found that people who make food decisions in advance, when not hungry, not tired, and not rushed, spend an average of 43% less on food than people who make in-the-moment decisions. The money saved isn't from willpower. It's from removing the conditions under which willpower gets bypassed. For impulse retail, the evidence-based intervention is embarrassingly simple. A 48-hour rule. Anything under $100 that you're considering purchasing outside of a planned shopping trip goes into a cart or a notes app, and you wait 48 hours. Research published in the Journal of Marketing Research found that this delay eliminates between 60% and 70% of impulse purchases. Not because people think harder about the decision, but because the emotional trigger that drove the impulse dissipates within hours. Most impulse purchases are mood regulation dressed up as transactions. The mood passes. The item loses its urgency. You keep your money. What makes all of this harder than it sounds is that these 9 categories aren't operating in isolation. They're interconnected through a web of behavioral reinforcement. When you're stressed, you're more likely to order delivery, buy a lottery ticket, and make an impulse purchase in the same afternoon. Stress degrades prefrontal cortex function, which is exactly the brain region responsible for long-term financial reasoning. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, has been shown in research from Stanford to bias decision-making toward immediate reward and away from deferred gratification. This is why financial vulnerability tends to cluster. The same conditions that make saving hard make spending easy. And most consumer products and services are specifically calibrated to reach you in that condition. The research on retirement readiness is not comforting. The Federal Reserve's most recent survey of consumer finances found that the median retirement savings for Americans between 55 and 64 is $185,000. The commonly cited figure for adequate retirement funding, maintaining your pre-retirement standard of living through your late 80s, is closer to $1.5 million for a middle-income household. That gap is not primarily a product of insufficient income. Median household income in the United States is approximately $74,000. A person earning $74,000 who saves aggressively from age 30 can reach $1.5 million by 67. The gap is behavioral. It's the behavior gap made concrete in the retirement savings statistics of an entire generation. You are not being asked to live in deprivation. That framing is how most budgeting advice fails, because it frames the entire conversation as sacrifice. What you're actually being asked to do is audit which expenditures are delivering genuine value and which ones are delivering the feeling of value while quietly removing your future options. There's a meaningful difference between those two things. A $6 coffee you drink while sitting across from someone you care about, that might be entirely worth it. A $6 coffee you consume in your car on autopilot because the habit is established, that's $2,190 a year in fees paid to your own inertia. The question isn't whether to spend. It's whether the spending is deliberate, whether it reflects what you actually value, or whether it reflects the gap between who you are at your best and the decisions your tired, distracted, commercially targeted self makes between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. The compounding of small, redirected decisions over decades is the most powerful wealth-building mechanism available to ordinary earners. Not stock selection, not real estate timing, not income level alone. The steady, consistent redirection of money that your cognitive vulnerabilities were bleeding away from you toward accounts that compound quietly and relentlessly in the background. A 40-year-old who redirects $900 per month into a low-cost index fund and never looks at it has approximately $980,000 at 65. A 40-year-old who continues the 9 habits described in this video has whatever the market gave them minus the behavior gap, minus the years of compounding they donated to convenience, habit, and engineered friction removal. The choice between those two futures is made not once, in some dramatic financial turning point moment. It's made quietly, repeatedly, in the small decisions that your brain has been carefully taught not to treat as decisions at all.